Greetings and welcome to this webinar on remembering past massacres in the Middle East, honoring the legacy and resilience of victims. I welcome you to this webinar on behalf of the Commission of the Churches on International Affairs of the World Council of Churches. Our commission is marking this year its 75th anniversary, and we have been organizing the series of regional webinars during which we remember past massacres and other similar tragedies that took place regionally during colonial times and in the past. The world history is sadly stained with various massacres against defenseless victims from various parts of our globe. And these horrific tragedies of the past, for some of them, would have amounted today to crimes against humanity or genocide. History is often written by the powerful, and therefore they tend to deliberately overlook or deny some atrocities that they committed in order to legitimize themselves or sometimes to fuel mistrust. So truth-telling about tragic past events not only helps in the creation of accurate historical records, it also helps victims to find closure by telling the stories, the details of the events they suffered, and we also allow them for proper mourning to achieve personal and communal healing. So during this series of webinars, we are looking at past massacres and the untold events that have mutilated bodies and minds. We hope with these webinars to offer a sacred space during which we lament, but also we honor and we pray. And our hope is to emulate conversations around remembering, around healing of memories, around reconciliation, and when possible, around reparations. Today's webinar will be moderated by Madame Seta Hadeshian. She is the Executive Assistant to the Secretary General of the Middle East Council of Churches, and she's also a member and secretary of the Armenian National Council of the Catholicos of the Holy See of Cilicia. Her co-facilitator will be my colleague, Reverend Dr. Mikey Roberts. He is the Program Executive for Spiritual Life and Faith and Order at the World Council of Churches. In this capacity, he coordinates the daily prayers at the WCC and also gives leadership to the musical and spiritual life initiatives of our organization. Without further delay, Seta and Mikey, I invite you both to guide us in this conversation.
Thank you, Sigma. And thank you, Mikey, for the introduction, and thank you for organizing this webinar. Today's webinar, which is to complement the Pilgrimage of Justice and Peace program of WCC, will deal with how survivors of the ethnic minorities of Eastern Anatolia, today's Turkey, which then was Western Armenia and Antioch, keep alive the memory of their ancestors perished in the genocide of late 1800s by Sultan Hamid, then in 1915 World War I by the Young Turks, and accomplished by Ataturk in late 1920s. 2.5 million Christian minorities, then the 20% of the total population of Turkey, Armenians, Assyrians, Syriacs, Chaldeans, and later Kurds, were massacred, persecuted, and deported from their homes and homeland, leaving behind lands and properties, businesses, and they perished in the death marches of the deserts of Deir Zor and Arabian deserts. By late 1920s, the percentage dropped down to 2%. Those who survived or ran away the sword were forever severed. They were displaced, forcibly Islamized, orphaned, poor and lonely, traumatized by the atrocities they witnessed, lost the thread that connected them to their past and their families. Yet they had to survive and bring back the parts of the puzzle torn into pieces on foreign lands of Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Palestine. With oral history, letters, memoirs, diaries, photographs, and drawings, they recreated the memory of their lost families, peoples, homes, and traditions of their homeland, and reincarnated the lost history erected the memory in the survivors and built their communities, schools, churches, and cultural centers. Our parents were ingenious architects who engineered a visionary homeland in our hearts. The webinar will be a conversation on remembering and honoring all those who have been massacred and convey only a glimpse of horrors survived. We have 4 panelists, and there are endless stories about atrocities committed to 4 of the peoples: Syriacs, Assyrians, Armenians, Chaldeans, and Kurds. We have one question addressed to 4 of our panelists who, from their own people's experience, will share with us of the many stories, only one. Our first panelist is MECC General Secretary, Dr. Michel Abbs. Dr. Abbs, you're most welcome. Can you identify one and briefly share with us the context in which it happened? The floor is yours, and you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
And Dr. Abbs, before you begin, let me just jump in and use this moment to actually introduce all of our other panelists, and then I will hand it back to you, Dr. Abbs. And since you are already being highlighted, let me just inform all of you that he is the General Secretary of the Middle East Council of Churches. As has been mentioned, he's an economist and sociologist. He holds a BA and an MA and high diplomas in both fields, and Dr. Abbs also holds a PhD in sociology with a focus on economic behavior. And he also lectures at the university level, actually did so very early, and has over 40 years of experience in this field. And so we're happy that you are with us. Also on our panel today is Mr. Sabri Atman, who is a native of southern Turkey, in the indigenous lands of the Assyrians. He moved to Austria due to political reasons, and then to Sweden 5 years later, where he had the chance to study economics, gaining a master's degree in human rights and genocide studies as well from the Kingston University in London. And Mr. Atman speaks very passionately about stateless people, and he identifies so much with that particular group. Our third panelist today is Dr. Otman Kamaj Otman, and he's the legal advisor at the Ministry of Justice in the Kurdish Regional Development. Sorry. He's also the director of Iraq section of International Human Rights Center, the IGFM in Frankfurt. And previously he was a legal senior advisor at the Independent Commission for Human Rights for the Kurdistan of Iraq from 2014 to 2021. So Dr. Atman, we are happy that you are with us. And our final panelist for today is Ms. Teni Piri Simonian, who is a member of the WCC Central Committee. She has represented and continues to represent the Armenian Church Catholicos of Cilicia, and she currently serves as the ecumenical representative of her church right here in Switzerland. So we're happy to have her with us. She's also the adjunct professor of religion and ethics at Webster University and a former staff member of the World Council of Churches. So we are happy to have all of our panelists with us here today, and we welcome you. Now, Dr. Michel, over to you, and I hope you remember the question that Madam Zeta posed to you, and we will come right back. Over to you, Dr. Michel.
Good morning. Thank you for your introduction. Thank you, Seta, for inviting me to that, and for organizing, for those who organized this panel. As a matter of fact, I will take a few seconds to apologize. I haven't been very socializing since the beginning. I put the Zoom on off because I had to expedite some administrative matters at the council. Well, as a matter of fact, I'm not Assyrian. I'm not Syriac. I'm not Assyrian. But my early intervention, my early relation to the MECC was through the Assyrian church and through the Syriac. And when I was hired the first time in the 1980s, I was thought to be a Syriac. So, but my memory is full of the Syriac and the Armenian genocides. I mean, Syriac, I mean by Syriac, all of them, Chaldeans, Assyrians, and Syrians. My memory is even earlier open to the Armenian genocide, since I live in an area in Ashrafi in Beirut where there are lots of Armenian neighbors, and where my parents told me stories about them, and where the elderly people told me stories about them. I say this as a part of answering the question, this is question number 3, to prevent victims from falling into amnesia or denial. And how do we memorialize these tragedies? Yes, I mean, this should never be forgotten. Ever since I started my research, it was a pre-PhD thesis at that time, started my work on Assyrians and Syrians. I was amazed to realize that they had massacres too. I thought only Armenians were massacred. And at that time, my spontaneous question was, why don't you make a campaigning out of that, out of this genocide that happened to you? And years later, I saw that they started something called Saifo, which is the remembrance, yearly remembrance of the Syriac Suryani genocide. Yes, campaigning should continue. I mean, memorial, we don't need monuments. Internet, the virtual society is enough. You may need to erect monument here and there, but the main thing is to keep digging into history, to keep digging into documents. And the more I dig on internet, the more I find the new documents. This blessing, which I call the internet, is very important to have new documents. I mean, when I made my last conferences on them 3 years later, it was 2 conferences on Armenian Syrianis and on the Greek Anatolians. I found new documents on Armenians and Syrianis. So we have to keep mobilizing people to publish anything they have over the internet, because this helps to keep the memory alive, to keep people thinking, to keep them aware. And this sort of crime of action has no prescription in time. I mean, in the legal sense of the term, no prescription. Plus the fact that people should know that those who left these lands, be it Armenians, Syrians, Assyrians, Greeks, and so on, Greek speaking, and so on, Anatolians, and so on, have lots of properties there. The churches have properties, municipal settings which were of certain religion or type have properties there. The families have properties there. They should be kept and safeguarded in a way to prevent the fortune and to prevent the inheritance, be it the collective one through the church or the individual one through the families. And I think for this reason, the government concerned are not apologizing or acknowledging the genocide, because it will have legal and financial repercussions, but it should continue this way. Memory should carry on. The more we have information, the more we should be publishing them and disseminating them. So this creates awareness, and this creates awareness not only for the Syriani and Armenian causes, but this creates awareness for people to learn from history that the genocides happen and that they are something very wrong, and that people will repent later and so on. But we should keep it. Am I within the time? Can I continue for some while?
It is exactly 4 minutes, Dr. Abbas.
4 minutes? Okay.
Yes.
So memory should carry on. Sustained memory maintenance. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Abbas. We go to the second panelist, Mr. Sabri Atman, the director of the Assyrian Genocide Research Center, SAPO. Can you hear, please?
Yeah, I hear you. Good morning.
Yeah. The floor is yours, Dr. Sabri. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the World Council of Churches for putting together such an important event. I think it is of utmost significance to bring speakers from the Assyrian, Armenian, Kurdish communities. It is important for the victims group to speak with one voice. I'm honored to be here today and to be among such great company with Dr. Michel Abs, Dr. Karmanj Othman, and Ms. Teni Pirisimonian. Teaching the past will help us changing the future. I welcome everybody following here today. And just to clarify something that is important, maybe some people, they don't know whether we call us Assyrian, Syriani, Syriac, Chaldean. You should know that we are one and the same people, but we call us with different names. That's one. And many years ago, I was fortunate to interview an Assyrian genocide survivor, Abdullah Göke from Germany, who was 107 years old. Abdullah Göke told me, I quote, "Women and girls were captured, men were killed. My younger brother was the most handsome boy. They killed him in front of my mother's and my eyes." He continued, "But you know, I am a Christian. I cannot hate, and hate does not help. But my big wish is those who did this crime against us could say sorry. I want to hear this word. To hear this word would make me continue to rest my life in peace." You know what? Abdullah Göke died just 6 months after my interview, without hearing the word he wished to hear. Still, until this day, Turkey governs by a president who says, I quote, "We are Muslim, and Muslims cannot commit genocide." Turkey still denies the Armenian, Assyrian, and Greek genocide. How can we rest? How can we keep in silence? How can we let our past to be our children's future? Denial stops the victims' groups to go through their healing process. Furthermore, denial is the last stage of genocide. The genocide of 1915 is ongoing genocide. Turkey didn't deal with its past yet. The genocidal mentality is still there. When the circumstances allow, they will do it again, and again. Therefore, it is very important to not forget and to speak about it. I will tell you what happened in 1915. The Assyrians were victims of physical, cultural, religious, and territorial genocide of geopolitical nature that was start to their exile, their uproar, and the suffering that continued to tear the community apart. The events of 1915 utterly shattered their lives and destroyed their society. Social and religious structures were ruined and completely disintegrated. These massacres took place over every wide area in Eastern Anatolia, in Persia, and in the province of Mosul from January 1915 to July 1918. Under the same condition and almost in the same place as those inflicted on the Armenians, which aimed to exterminate any non-Turkish or religiously non-Muslim groups. This suicidal policy of ethnic cleansing was stirred by pan-Islamism, religious fanaticism, and pan-Turkishism. Christians were considered infidels, kafir. The call for jihad, announced on November 14, 1914, started to orchestrate it for political ends, was part of the plan. The declaration of jihad in the Ottoman Empire made the Muslim population, Turks, and Kurds in large to participate on the Assyrian and Armenian genocide of 1915. The Jihad Declaration was read in all the empire mosques, which encouraged Muslims to loot and kill infidels. This declaration gave the Kurds the opportunity to participate in the extermination of the Assyrian Christians in the eastern provinces of the Ottoman Empire. For the Muslim perpetrator, jihad was halal, to translate it to English as permissible and therefore lawful to loot and kill infidels. Furthermore, those who were killing 7 infidels could go to heaven, and there were too many Kurds and Turks who wanted to go to heaven in 1950.
Thank you, Mr. Othman. Thank you very much. I will follow Mikey's order of the panelists. Next is Dr. Karamanj Uthman, from Kurdistan, Iraq. Master Uthman, please tell the story of your people that underwent.
Thanks very much, actually, and thanks for WCC to provide such kind of important opportunity to talk about very important issues, which is very much still up to date, active in the Middle East in general. Due of the COVID, actually, we are talking online. Otherwise, I hope one of the day all together to see each other in one hall and to shaking hand and to work more on that case, because when we are talking about the memory, we are talking from point of victims and the survivors. But if you see other side, the perpetrators and the actually people or states committed to genocide, they are work more than us actually to change the memory or to prevent people and activists and civil societies to memorize such kind of crimes. Why? Because they want to change the history, and also they don't want, as both distinguished panelists before me, they don't want to recognize such kind of crimes. If I am talking about Iraq in general, actually it's like a land of the genocide. I'm using the term of international crimes sometimes. Why? Because it's included genocide, massacres, crimes against humanity, war crimes, even act of aggression. People safely stayed at home and they use it act of aggression. They destroy their homeland, heritage, cultural, and everything. So if you are going back to the history, there's a lot of massacres, unfortunately. And because of the fail of reconciliation, we can see every 20 or 25 years, the new cycle of the violence coming back again. If you are talking about history, and if you are talking about the recent situation with ISIS, what happened in Iraq, and especially targeting Yazidis and let's say Christians and Kurds, that's very interesting and important to discuss and to search on that, because why that's happened again. Memory, it's very important in general for prosecution. Unfortunately, in the Middle East in general and in Iraq especially, there's it's become part of the culture that people committed the genocide, and perpetrators, they have never been prosecuted in local or international court, and that's give a chance to other actually to continue such kind of culture. So there's a recycling of leaders of the genocide and perpetrators to still continuing committing the crime of the genocide. We heard that the fight against ISIS ended, or let's say Iraqi state declared that we are declared the victory on the ISIS. But unfortunately, if you are see on the ground, still the genocide committed against the Christians and the Yazidis and the rest of the minorities. So memorizing, it's important for the prosecution. Memorize, it's important for fact finding to see exactly what's happened. Memorizing such crimes against humanity and genocide, especially against Christians and all the minorities in the Middle East, it's important in terms of victims, but also, which is one of the fundamental rights for the victims to see and to know what's happening exactly, but also it's a public right, and the public, they should know exactly, not only Kurds or Christians or Yazidis or the rest of the minorities, everyone, they should know what's happened, because it's part of fact finding, sometimes through the documenting, through memorizing, through archive, you can see exactly what's happened and how we can use to prevent that for the future. In 1933, there was a genocide in Derabon, actually against the Christians, also in Somalia and also Syria in 1969, and also in 1959, when the revolution failed in Iraq, also a lot of houses destroyed for the Christians in the Mosul in the other side. Before 2003, the number of the Christians in Iraq, it was 1.5 million. Today, only 300,000, unfortunately, they are living in Iraq, and most of them, they are living in the north area, which is the Kurdistan region, because of the peace and security. So that's unfortunate, because the world, it's not created to be painted in one color. We don't want Iraq to be all of them Arab or Kurdish or Muslims. Such kind of diversity, it's very interesting, and it's very important for us because that's adding value. And also that's the original land for everyone to have peacefully life together. We will have a chance to talk more about crimes against humanity and genocide, but it is very important also just to address that when Iraq created at 1922 as an independent state, at that time it was under the British colonialism, and in 1932 it became an independent country. At that time, the mission of the League of the Nations visited Iraq to check the Iraqi availability, or let's say the Iraqi eligibility to be a member of the League of Nations as a member state. When the mission came to Iraq and they visited all the parts of Iraq, the mission was included of three, let's say, international experts, one from Hungary, the other one from Scotland, and the other one from Belgium. When they provided the recommendation at that time for the, let's say, Security Council of the League of the Nations, they said Iraq, it can be a member of the League of Nations confidentially to protect and to respect the rights of Yazidis and Christians and the Kurds. So that's a conditional, actually, let's say, point for the Iraq to be member of international community. And after the League of the Nations, all the obligations transferred to the United Nations. So we can say that legally, still those states is obliged to respect all the minorities. Otherwise, they will lose their legitimacy. I will stop from that point, and of course, we will have more chance to talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tuman. Our last panelist is Ms. Teni Peri-Simonian from the Armenian Orthodox Church. Teni, I'm sure you have huge resources of stories, but please tell us one very typical one. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm sorry,
the floor
but
is yours.
I'm going to have a different approach that I have chosen. Our struggle today is a struggle of facts, truth, and denial. And here I'm going to use a quotation from Hannah Arendt, and then building my presentation on that, where she says, perplexities inherent in the historical sciences are real, but they are no argument against the existence of factual matter, nor can they serve as a justification for blurring the dividing lines between fact, opinion, and interpretation. And I think this is our challenge. Now, also, after making this statement, considering the context in which we are people today talking to one another, I want to acknowledge that the suffering of Christian citizens of the Turkish Republic, I want to mention the Kurdish and other Muslim neighbors who have been victims of the fact creation historiography of Turkish nationalism. I'm sure we all blame each other once, but I think it's time we have to realize what is the root cause that created those lies. Now, I want to mention two facts about Armenians, because facts related to the genocide and facts related to the land and the ownership. Now, the genocide, I want to quote Taner Akçam. I'm sure you have heard, those of you who have spoken, I'm sure you know him and his name. His 29 books are living live documentation and living archives for us. However, his latest book, In Killing Orders, that was published in 2018, he showed and documented all the archives in the Turkish Ottoman collection, which were in Turkish, Ottoman Turkish, he translated into English, which were the killing orders given by Minister, by the Interior Minister, Talal Pasha, to Naim Pasha, who was at the time the deportation at the deportation office, as well as we have Naim Efendi's memoirs. These are translated, which show already in itself is an exposure of all the lies that we have been told so far. The second truth, as I said, is related to land, because Turkey considers land is theirs. However, we should remember as Armenians that we cannot deny that Armenia was created at the plateau of Mount Ararat, and that we are the first Christian nation in the land, 301, and even before Rome or anybody else as a nation. Now, the Armenian kingdom, because of that whole complexity of people you mentioned and talked about, has been moving around all the time. And finally, the kingdom of Cilicia, which is ironically today around the region of Adana, was near the middle, also at the up down to the Mediterranean Sea, was moved from its original homeland in 1080. So stayed there until 1375, but in between, the church also, because we are speaking as Christian victims of the massacre, the church also moved with the people to the kingdom from its historical place where today is Yerevan. Now, the church stayed with the people and we walked with the people until the kingdom was destroyed by the Ottomans, but the church stayed until 1921 in its own historical monastery and with whoever was left remained there. Now, 1375 and onwards, we were all living in a multi-ethnic Ottoman Empire under Muslim law. I think we don't have to say much about how the Islamic law, what it meant for Christian minorities. However, during this period, as Seta mentioned, 1894-96, we had our first historical trauma of massacres by Sultan Hamid. Shortly after that period, I don't have to tell you the story, but you know that the Young Turk movement had started. They propagated, what was the politics? They were propagating a new ethno-national thinking of a pure, healthy Turkish nation and a homeland. Here, the concept of homeland changed. What was homeland for us became the dream of the Young Turks.
Penny,
Now,
we don't have much time.
okay, I've come to, well, finally, I want to come, one more statement I want to make. The 24th of April, we commemorate as the day when it was the day of the genocide. But what was it? It was really a demand, under the pretext of resettlement, they tried to collect and kill and destroy all our intelligentsia. And that was based exactly on the order by Talat Pasha of that date. And therefore, the two dates coincide, and until today, we commemorate that date. I'm sorry, I'm so moved that I'm just staggering. Now, one sentence I want to say, that the first genocide concept was coined by Raphael Lemkin already as early as long before 1948, when the Genocide Convention was accepted. And of course, this is one of the three tricky things about genocides before or after the convention. Now, in 1923, the Young Turks created the Islamic State, the new Turkish Republic, but also they signed the Lausanne Treaty, and we know what are the terms of Lausanne Treaty and the implications for our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Tenny. I'm sorry. I know the topic is so huge and the suffering is so immense that each one of the speakers have so much to say. However, we go back to Reverend Mikey if he has any questions in the chat room. Mikey?
Thank you, Seta. Thank you to all. And like you said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. But before we go to the question, and I also see your hand, Dr. Abs, we are going to use this moment to actually have some music. And our hope is that this moment when we hear this music and we engage with it, that it will allow us as well to enter into the gravity of the moment, and also to use this time to simply reflect. So I invite you, I'll come back to you, Dr. Michelle, but for now, let us listen to this music, and then we'll have a short prayer as we reflect. Thank you so much for that. Let us pause, and in this moment as we pause, let us pray. We come, Lord, we come before you, God, lamenting. We come before you, crying out to you. We stand in your presence, and as we do so, we remember the pain of the past, but we also remember your promises to us as your people. And as we pray for all of the people of the Middle East, we thank you that they are the work of your hands. They are your handiwork. We pray for seeds of love and forgiveness to be sown. We pray for your people to be comforted. We pray, O God, that truly all will come to know the love of Jesus the Christ. We pray for strangers to no longer be strangers, but to be friends. We pray for those who see themselves as enemies to be changed so that they see each other as brothers and sisters. Forgive every sin. Forgive the silence. Forgive the sighing. Forgive the complicity. Forgive a spiritual famine. Forgive our faithless fear. Forgive our fathers and mothers. Forgive our friends and leaders. Forgive our enemies. And as we receive your forgiveness, help us, Lord, to also be bearers of forgiveness as we together seek to work towards reconciliation, towards unity, and towards peace. For we pray in the name of the one who is the Prince of Peace, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Mr. We do have a question that has come to us. This is from Metropolitan Zimbabwe and Angola, Metropolitan Seraphim. And Metropolitan Seraphim has posed a question to anyone, all on the panel. He says, what is the role of the WCC to support international law for the restoration of justice of the victims of the acts of genocide? He said one example, the restoration of justice is people like the genocide of the Armenians is to get back their motherland or to get back to their property or to get compensation for their property. So he's asking Metropolitan Seraphim, what do we think is the role of the WCC to support international law for the restoration of justice? I don't know anyone in the panel would want to take that up.
Yeah, who would like to answer?
Any maybe?
Any?
Shall I? Okay.
Yes.
Well, as a former staff of WCC, I know very well that WCC's role is really to state the truth, and not only just to listen and state the truth. And they have done tremendous work. And I'm going to mention, for example, I want to show you this book. It's a publication of the World Council of Churches already in 1984. And the title, very rightly, is Armenia, the Continuing Tragedy. It's a tragedy that is continuing. I think this summarizes the role of advocacy, hard work of WCC using international law and everything, but the result is still continuing tragedy. In some cases, it has been more successful, but in our case of Middle East, I think they haven't been because of geopolitics and internal and other power interests.
Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
sorry.
Yes, Sigma.
No, just to add on what Teni has just said is, as you all know, WCC has a long tradition of upholding human rights and also voicing the voices and the struggles of the voiceless people. And when it comes to issues of restorative and reparative justice, there used to be actually a program within CCIA focusing on impunity and healing of memories. And this publication that Teni is showing is a CCIA publication, actually. And one of our former colleagues, Dr. Guillermo Kerber, was particularly working on bringing the voices of these churches and communities to the International Court of Justice to make sure that their claims were heard and also there was due process of law. But of course, it's a long struggle because, you know, as an ecumenical organization, we try as much as we can to side with the oppressed, the marginalized, and to voice those concerns. So just to echo what Tenias was saying, we always speak the truth and we side by those who are victims of these tragedies.
And probably this webinar, which is within the context of the pilgrimage of justice to justice and peace, is another indication of how to bring to the surface, to the awareness of people, what injustices has been committed around the world. So it's a very important role, and thank you for WCC for still being the leader in this. Anybody else who would like to answer?
I see Dr. Michel has placed his hand up, and maybe we could also hear quickly from Mr. Atman or Dr. Atman, especially from the outside, how do you see the WCC collaborating to address these issues? Go ahead, Dr. Michel.
Yes, thank you. Well, as a matter of fact, we are having more and more governments and people and organizations acknowledging the Armenian genocide, and all-inclusive the SIFO, the Syriac genocide. But if we don't reach a stage where there is a law, international law, which acknowledges these events in a final and irrevocable way, plus the fact of ascertaining and confirming the ownership of land. The land is very important. Monuments are very important. Churches and monasteries and so on are very important. And not rewarding, not paying, not compensating, getting back the ownership, provided that these people may come back one day, whatever, who knows? You can never know. But at the same time, and this was the reason for this, I raised my hand earlier. At the same time, these events should not prevent friendship between people. I mean, we were brought up with a hatred to Turkey and to the Turks. And then I realized later, gradually, that there are lots of very good people, very good Turks. And when the big witness for that is when this famous Armenian journalist was massacred. The number of Turks, the number of Turks who demonstrated in the streets, and what I read sometimes from Turks, without forgetting that the grandson of Jamal Pasha wrote a book, and once we met at the Armenian Catholic Crusade with a prominent Turkish writer. I mean, this should not prevent friendship between people and the altruistic behavior and recognition of these genocides. This should be taken into consideration, not to just say that these people are bad. There is a government which was bad at that time. They made lots of massacres, they made lots of wrongdoings. Later on, there are other governments which I don't want to evaluate or judge them, but we have to acknowledge that the actual government is not really being positive, and they should be. We should ask him to be positive and to acknowledge and to accept, provided that they will bear the repercussions of this in terms of legal and financial recognitions. But there should be a law, first from UNESCO, to protect the monuments, an imperative law, because UNESCO law requires that the local government accepts. No, there should be a law which protects these monuments regardless of the attitude of the local government, because these are government of the absentees, of people who are absent or who are expelled. And then later on, we can carry on with other dimensions. I mean, you cannot pay for the victim.
Dr. Abs, we may have to cut you, of course. Sorry to barge it, but you're making some valid points. But we also just wanted to hear quickly from our other two panelists before we go into the next section. And then we're going to come right back to you, Dr. Abs. Yes, I don't know if Dr. Atman or Dr. Atman has anything to add in terms of the WCC's role here.
Yeah, thanks very much. Actually, the awareness raising, it's very important. And especially when we are talking about the MENA region, which is Middle East and North Africa, the access to information, it's not much, let's say, open and available like it exists in Europe countries. For that, the access of information, I mean exactly translation of the books. Now, if you are talking about, for example, all the genocide happened against Armenians, Chaldeans, for example, Yazidis, and all the other minorities, maybe we can find some sources in French or maybe in English, but very limited in Arabic or in Kurdish. And most of the books translated, I mean, it is sometimes biased, actually. It's not showing the reality. So for WCC, I hope if we can work on providing, let's say, sources and books for the academia. For example, in university, if some students try to write an academic essay, for example, on genocide crimes happened in the Middle East or in Iraq, there is very limited access to information. And beside of that, it's an important point I like to address, actually. When we are talking about international crimes, it's right in the conventions and in the resolutions addressed the 4 crimes, which is act of aggression, genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. But beside of that, and especially after the International Court of Yugoslavia and Rwanda, the International Customary Law developed another one crimes, which is called incitement of genocide crime. If you are talking about the Middle East, maybe the genocide stopped as exists typically before. There is no use of, for example, guns or bombs. But in the other side, if you are looking to the media, if you are looking to the, let's say, public sphere, there's an inciting actually community to use hate speech against minorities, or to be exactly using kind of discrimination. For example, if you are looking to the Dabak, which was the formal journal for the ISIS, there is a lot of fatwas encouraging jihadists and perpetrators to kill Christians and Yazidis. So incitement still continue in our region, and that's very interesting, and that's very dangerous. Why? Because that's a hidden issue. Sometimes we cannot touch it, but it's coming through radio, through television, or sometimes through education. So even that will be very interesting.
Thank you. Valid point. Sabri,
yeah, I would like to say also a few points, please. Here we mentioned a lot: Turks, Kurds, Arab, Assyrian, Germans, whatever they are. And just one thing I want to emphasize: these terms, they are, of course, they are good and bad people. We never can generalize. When I say Turks, Ottoman Turkey, I can't blame all the Turks. When I say the atrocities done by the Kurds, never I can generalize. I have many, many good Kurdish friends, Turkish friends, and this is between good and bad people. Bad people, they did these atrocities. I think the World Church Council to educate people, to raise awareness, to bring people together like today, it is very important. And something also we should keep in mind, they were not some certain people, Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, Jamal Pasha, or Adolf Hitler, organize everything. Unfortunately, majority of people also participate on these crimes. And I see it in the Ottoman genocide of 1915 against the Christian populations, Armenian, Assyrians, and Greeks. People, they participated on this genocide. In Germany, during the Holocaust, not only few people organized, even the German, the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church role should be discussable. And we need to come together to educate people, to raise awareness about the past and to build tomorrow together.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for that. So Zita, over to you to lead us in the second half of our
thank you
panel.
very much, Reverend Mikey. I would wish and I would pray one day that the prayer that you made is pronounced by our enemies. I would kindly ask all the panelists to remain within the limit of answering to questions only within 2 minutes and respecting the time that is given to you. Now we go to the second half of the webinar, whereby the organizers have prepared 4 questions, all of them interrelated. I mean, they can be answered in one, or you can choose only one part of it as you have decided. I will quickly go over the questions. How would you say a nation transcend past massacres and move towards healing? What are the lessons from these past tragedies, and how do we ensure that future generations learn from the past, ensuring that history will not be repeated? The second, how are these fallen heroes in your respective countries remembered? How do we honor their martyrdom? Third, what is done to prevent these victims from falling into amnesia or denial? How do we memorialize these tragedies? Are monuments helpful or enough? What about reparations to descendants to these victims? Has there been any apologies? Now these, it is up to you how you respond. Our first panelist will be Tenny Peri-Simonian. We are changing the sequence of the responders, and please respect the time, Tenny. Right. All of you. It begins with you, but it goes to all.
I just want to say that no healing of memory without exposing denial and affirming justice. I think this is the essence for me. Now, World Council document was one. Today's reality is that Armenia is a diaspora community. And in this diaspora, I will not repeat, we commemorate, we write, we speak, and we do everything. And also, whatever you described, we do it, demanding the return of property, but I'll come more specifically. One of the things I want to acknowledge is the fact that within the context of the World Council of Churches, many member churches in the different countries came and supported the martyrs. For example, we have this year the German aid organization of the church commemorated 123 years of its work for the Armenians. Then we have the American Near East Relief. I'm not going into detail, but one of the important things for me is that Western churches were accompanying many of our people. And the other thing which I would like to say is that we are fighting. Here I would like, we are fighting for the international community if we go, because we have been speaking about in the UN framework. 33 countries of the UN, which are also UN member countries, have recognized the Armenian genocide. But what's the result? Because of power politics. Then I'm hoping what we are doing as a church, for example, there is in 2015, on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the genocide, His Holiness Aram I, who is in view of the Lausanne Treaty, the successor of the Catholicos who was kicked out of the monastery in 1921 without any warning, a lawsuit to the Turkish authorities, to the highest court, demanding the return of the church and the monastery where the ruins are and the road, the name Armenian Road is still there. Now, this suit since 2015 continues like a football. We go, it's denied, we come back, questions, and only last week again, we were, the nth time, the judge turned down our appeal, so that we cannot even get to the European Human Rights Court. Now, we spoke of the hidden Christians. We have a big awareness building about Islamized Armenians. The 100th anniversary really encouraged this. We have journalists who have published huge books about interviewing and also making these people tell their stories, what happened. And as one of the speakers mentioned, it was a clear policy what to do with women, what to do with children, especially young women for the harems, the young children in orphanages to become Muslim. So all policies are exposed today. And the challenge, at least for our church right now, is to see how this whole concept of, or the community of Islamized Armenians really will have the opportunity to tell their stories, and also we will be able to create a more harmonious new Armenian reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teni. We go to our next speaker, who is Dr. Sabri Atman, please.
Oh, thank you. I'm not yet doctor, but I will be soon. Thank you very much. I will continue with the denial and also the healing process for the victims groups. During the 1915 genocide, 2/3 of our people lost their life in the whole of the Turkish Persian territory. Hundreds of villages left in huge number of orphans, captured children, abandoned men, women, and girls, kidnapped and sold, widow refugees, those reported and those forcibly converted to Islam. I am in contact with many Assyrian Muslims in the Diyarbakir region, and the number goes to 10,000 people. We don't have exact number how many they are. It is very difficult for them, for obvious reason, to go out and to say they are Assyrians. All these massacres in various areas in Anatolia and Mesopotamia against Armenian, Assyrian, and Greeks were systematically planned and implemented by the Committee of Union and Progress, Ittihad-u Teraki. Their aim was to homogenize Turkey, which they did. This genocidal concept was planned and implemented by the Ottoman leaders Talat, Cemal, and Enver Pasha. We should keep in mind that in 1915, the perpetrator did not only kill over 300,000 Assyrians, when 1.5 million Armenians. They did not only take our land and our properties from us, they did not only destroy our language, our national identity, but they also destroyed our future to be a nation in our ancient homeland. In a very similar way, the Iraqi government planned and implemented the Simele massacre of 1933. They caused us to live all around the world, separated from each other. They caused us go through a very painful assimilation process in the diaspora. The Turkish Republic was born out of the destruction of the indigenous...
Dr. Sabri.
Okay.
We need to mute Dr. Abs.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. The Turkish Republic was born out of the destruction of the indigenous Christians, mainly the Armenians, Assyrian, and Greeks. It is clear that the Committee of Union and Progress planned and the genocide against our people to create a homogenized country of one Turkish flag, one Turkish nation, one Turkish language, and one religion, which is Islam. They killed more than 2 million people, and still they are not punished. They are free and they deny the crime they committed. Abdullah Goki, that I have interviewed him, didn't hear the sorry word he wished to hear. And now my question is, will you forget about all these atrocities, or will you hold them accountable for the crime they have committed and ask for justice? And do not forget, denial is to be killed twice. Modern Turkey and Iraq have been found guilty of the Assyrian genocide. However, both governments have failed to acknowledge their crimes. The Assyrian people around the world push and demand for justice. Some people think the past is the past and it is meaningless to speak about. They say it is better to forget about it. However, we will remain not silent. However, we will hold both Turkey and Iraq responsible for their crimes in 1915 and 1933. In fact, the Assyrian genocide is today recognized by International Association of Genocide Scholars, Sweden, Armenia, Netherlands, the Vatican, Austria, Germany, and by the Czech Republic. Additionally, there are states in the United States and Australia also recognize the genocide. Assyrians, Armenian, and Greek genocide of 1915 and the Simele massacre of 1933 were crimes against humanity, regardless of ethnic, language, or faith differences. We all need to work together and raise awareness of past genocide, because only then we can prevent future atrocities against humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sabri, for being in time. Dr. Michel Abbas, please, the floor is yours, and you have only 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm sorry first for opening my message, but I had an urgent message I should have heard, so I apologize for that. Well, as a matter of fact, maybe you've seen that I already answered the third question in my first intervention. I tackled it with it a little, but I'll be dealing with the first question. Healing, there is no healing. A wounded population, a wounded nation, that deeply wounded by massacres and displacement and expulsion is never healed, at least for the 2-3 first generations. Even though if it's being compensated with other benefits, it will not heal. The memory remains injured for a long time. Now, the benefit for those who made the wound is that the people who should be healing are displaced. They are leaving the area. They are going abroad. They're now dispersed in Europe and America and the Americas. And maybe after 2-3 generations, they will forget. And forgetting is healing. But I think that from time to time, there will be always people remembering these nations that they were deeply wounded and deeply slaughtered. Therefore, even with apology, there is no healing because the wound is there. You may be forgiving, but you will not forget. As Mandela said it, I'm sure you have heard that. What do we learn from previous tragedies? Yes. I mean, dealing with tragedies should give lessons to populations, should be included in the curricula and the teaching curricula and the education to show to new generations and young generations worldwide, not only in a specific sector of the world, that such things could happen, such atrocities took place, and what they made as repercussions for people, for those who did the massacres and for those who were massacred, because also those who did the massacres, in their deep down, they have a loss of remorse, although they try to deny it and say that they were defending themselves or providing the unity of the nation and so on and so forth. Now, these lessons should be learned for human rights, for human dignity, for the safeguard of the diversity of populations and nations and so on. History will not be repeated. I think it will be repeated all the time. Human being forgets, and from time to time, people make massacres. If you see the history of this area here, it started with the massacres in northern Antioch. I mean, all this area with from Antioch, from Mercy to Tur Abdin, to Hakari. I know this area very well. I studied it villages by village and saw what these people left and how the people left. Then it continued to Palestine, and then it went to Southern Sudan. I mean, people will never learn because new generations don't know what happened first, what happened before. Maybe with education, with the promotion of this culture of diversity and so on, it will improve. But nevertheless, there will always be crazy people who would lead crazy groups to do wrongdoings with populations. Thank you. This time you will not interrupt me like
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Abbas. Yes. So our last panelist is Dr. Karamanj Tuman from the Kurdistan, Iraq. Please, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, always there is a very famous statement when they are talking about legislation. Always we are saying the first legislation founded in the history, which is Hammurabi. It was in Iraq, or at that time, it's Mesopotamia. That's right. It's the first legislation in the history, one side, but in other side, that's also an evidence that the first violation of the rights actually happened at that time. For that, as most of the panelists, distinguished panelists actually address it, how we can prevent the genocide for the future. That's one of the important point, and how we can memorize. I just want to address also another short, very small point. All the genocides committed, actually it's a double genocide. For example, the genocide committed against the Christians in Turkey, it was double. First, because they are not Muslim. Second, because they are not Turks. The same happened in Iraq, for example, against Kurdish or maybe Christians, the same. First, they are not Arabic. Second, they are not Muslim, for example. So it is a systematic genocide, and it is a duplicated genocide. For example, even as a terminology, for example, my surname is Othman. Why? Because at that time, it was kind of regulation. If any family born a new family member and his name is Othman, so he will be free to not pay the taxes for 1 year. So for that, you can see from Mauritania and Morocco, Othman, Osman, Uthman, even at the Balkans. It's very important from my point, actually, the recognition for the genocide crimes and the massacres, recognition at the international level and also at the local level. And at the local level, at the three authorities, which is the government, the statement of the government is very important. The second one, the parliament, to enact legislations actually to prevent. Now in Kurdistan regional government, now we are preparing a draft law, how we can prevent this hate speech. Also, we, let's say, enacted a new law, which is the minority rights law. So parliament also is playing a very important role. Beside of that, the judiciary power, which is courthouses and the judiciary. Beside of that, if you are looking to the minority situation, nowadays, it's not necessary to look to the big cities. For example, if I want to check the minority, for example, I'm not necessary to look to Paris or New York or, for example, Cairo. It's necessary to look to the villages. If the minorities, for example, Christians, still they are keeping their villages, or systematically also under the name of the master plan organization, maybe also those lands took. So for that, Jews, for example, they live in the country, they live in Iraq, and we need a legislation to provide, let's say, an umbrella for them to come back and to retake back the lands. Lands is important. Beside of that, archive and the museums. And unfortunately, sometimes in the victimized community, there is no one policy, or let's know one direction to combine all sources, human resource and the budget, to work in one direction. Part of the lobbying and awareness raising, we can see sometimes different NGOs, different associations, they are working in different programs in different direction. So I mean, as a strategy, it's very important, for example, WCC to be a platform to combine all these efforts all together. I will stop from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Reverend Mikey? Do we have questions in the chat room?
No, we don't have any questions in the chat room, but as I have listened to this particular second segment, I was particularly struck by the question of denial. Denial is to be killed twice. I think Sabri, I can't remember who said that. And Dr. Othman, Yeah, and
That is
Dr.
true.
Artman, the point that you also made about in that same way, a double genocide. And if I put those two together, you wonder to what extent people are being killed, maybe even more than twice, because if already there's a double genocide and then there is the denial on top of that, there is a sense in which there is this ongoing killing and not just the physical now, but also the memory and ensuring. I appreciated too what Tenny said earlier. How do you keep people illiterate? And I think what has happened here is that based on popular media, certain stories are well known globally. You know, the whole world knows about, you know, Hitler and yes, the atrocity and the Holocaust. But how do we bring this to the fore so that in the same way people, you know, I don't want to say the bad news travel fast, but in the same way persons know about the Holocaust, what can we do to ensure that the story of the genocides in the Middle East, we are happy that, you know, the Armenian genocide has been recognized, but what about the others? And maybe we can also learn, what did the Armenians do to get their genocide sort of on the front burner? And how do we ensure that some of these other genocides that Sabri or Othman have talked about, that are sort of in the background, also gain that similar attention, and by so doing, kind of move the world from its illiterate position to a sense of being literate?
Dr. Mikey, I would like perhaps to answer to last question, that recognition is not enough. It has to go beyond recognition, because people are being satisfied with the recognition, and the enemy, who has occupied 2/3 of Armenia, still continues reclaiming as his own land. Reparation, recognition, reparation, they go hand in hand. If there is no reparation, then there is no, I mean, recognition will be only in the papers or in the archives. So that's why it has to go beyond that. And international laws should be the prosecution of the enemy in the genocidal acts, so that, you know, they will accept what they have done. As in purging, you know, your punishment.
Yeah, thank you. And the role of international law. Yeah, I don't know if any of the other panelists want to, we have to really make sure the international laws are applied here. Yes.
We still have time. And
yes,
if
Tenny,
any
I
of
think
you,
Tenny and Dr. Othman. Tenny, you go first, and then Dr. Othman. Yeah. You're muted, Tenny. You're muted. We know you're speaking words of wisdom, but we can't hear you on voice yet.
No.
Yes.
I'm speaking from my heart and my experience. Well, yes, recognition, we have all these recognitions. As I mentioned, the number of countries have asked us, but the whole point is not enough to recognize. And the symbolic act of really following into recognition or forcing people to recognize, giving visibility what people are demanding. For example, as I mentioned about the right for us to get back to our cathedral and monastery, very centuries old, and all from the local municipal court to the highest administrative court of Turkey denying and saying that we are missing documentation, it is not correct, inventing the realities, we will get nowhere unless there is a systemic change where those who are inventing the lies, imposing on the people, are disappearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Inventing lies. Isn't that so much a part of our 21st century narrative? Yes, that is so true. Dr. Othman and then Dr. Abs.
Yeah, just quickly, actually, the genocide, it is linked to the human security approach, which that's important. From point of law, there is international and local crimes. Local crimes maybe in some community, something as an act recognized as the crime, but in some other community, it's not recognized, or there is different, let's say, punishment. But why the genocide? It's important because it's linked to the human security as an approach. What's happening in Turkey, in Iraq, in the other countries, in Lebanon, that's linked to the security, human security in Germany, in Brazil, in the US, in everywhere. So that's a very interesting argument for that. If you are looking, most of the states denying recognizing. Why? Because they know exactly what's behind, and how it's important to do. For that, actually, lobbying is very important, and also linking genocide to the human security approach, because it's not only economic security or health security, that's a security for whole humanity everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Sabri wanted to jump in before we come to the Abs. Yes.
Yeah, I think Dr. Othman and my last name are very similar. And, you know, both they were given to us by the Ottoman Turks in order to assimilate. And my real name, Sabro, and my last name is Bengaro. But this name, Sabri Atman, was given to me by Turkey. We were not allowed to choose our first and last name. Also, our villages, town names, they are changed to Turkish in order to Turkification policy. Of course, to say sorry, empty sorry is not enough, but it is not about money. We want these people, these countries to face their history, and sorry should have a meaning. It's I don't want their money. Their money can't bring 2-3 million people back alive, but I want them to change their mentality, to be mature enough to recognize the past genocide. This can secure us to live in peace and harmony together. Otherwise, they will do it again and again.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Abs?
Yes. Recognition is never enough. Recognition is the start. And I mentioned it twice in my 2 interventions. It's very important to recognize as an introduction to having legal and financial consequences to that. The legal, I mentioned it, and Tani mentioned it too. Monuments, lands, churches, monasteries, and so on should be safeguarded. And the international law and the UNESCO law should be changed so that you can safeguard the property of the absent. This is the same law existing in Palestine. The absent, if he's still there, he should be able to manage it from remotely his ownership. The land left in Hakkari, the land, I mean, all the properties, the churches and land and monasteries left in Hakkari, in Tur Abdin, in Messi, in Adana, in all Anatolia. The old churches, the first church in which St. Paul prayed when he was going to Anatolia, still is being occulted, is being obscured. All this should be recognized. Plus, I mean, I cannot pay, as I told you, for those who died. Nobody can evaluate their lives. Nobody knows how many they were. But there should be also sort of financial compensation for the groups. I mean, for the churches at least, who lost their people. These people, this is the way people learn. No pain, no gain. Germany learned because it paid for the Nazi crimes. And Turkey, the new, the modern, the loving Turkey, loving quote unquote, should learn by paying for what the Turkey al-Fatah did for Talat Anwar and Company Pasha did for these people. They even massacred Kurd. Nobody really mentions the massacred Kurd. They massacred Yazidis. They massacred Alawites. I have documentation for all that. It's huge. It was a big empire. It was dying. It was hitting everywhere. This is history, but you, Turkey, should learn from its history.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Zeta, we have about, I think,
Yes,
12 so minutes.
12 to 30, yeah,
yes.
10 minutes, 11 minutes.
If I may, I'm coming to you, Tani, but I must admit, as one who's sitting as a someone as one from the Caribbean, you know, this Middle East information is actually quite interesting. And I remember the very first time I went to Cyprus, and we were hosted by a wonderful Metropolitan Vasilius. And one day we were taken across to the occupied part of Cyprus. And it was very touching to hear Metropolitan Vasilius take us to the seminary where he was trained. to go to these churches. And going back to your point, Dr. Abs, here we were now as Christians visiting Christian sites, but looking at wonderful Orthodox churches, which were now mosque. And I could sense his deep pain, because this is not something from 18th century. You know, this is a living history, and the pain and all of that comes with it. And I wonder to what extent, in terms of recognition, how we can help not just to open the door of recognition necessarily for the perpetrators, but also how do we inform the world? Because here I was, for me, visiting that region and actually hearing about that for the first time. And so how do you advocate for something when in fact you're even ignorant about it? And I guess my point is how others have been able to make their history known to the rest of the world, so that they can, in essence, gain alliance to help them advocate. And I guess that is my question as well. How do we help to gain alliance so that your story gains a much broader appeal globally? And then that will also help with advocacy, because let's not fool ourselves. Countries only recognize certain things when pressure is placed upon them, and it comes back to economics. You know, some of these countries willingly forget international law, except when the dollar sign is being impacted. So with that increased knowledge, increased advocacy, increased lobbying, and so on, and how do we get that information out? So Tani, and then Dr. Abs, and well, anyone can jump in, and Segma as well. Your hands are raised. Yes.
Well, I want to come to advocacy, because this is what I wanted to say. And advocacy, I want to relate it to CCIA's, something that you had written about the forthcoming Karlsruhe Assembly, in the document, that you would like to use some of these experiences there. And I think that's a very good place where that could be done. For example, I will give you an example. We have the history of the Swiss Reformed Church and missionaries coming and helping Armenians from the first day. And the church, you know that our delegates to the assembly will be traveling around in Switzerland, in Germany. On that Sunday, when they will be in Switzerland, they will be speaking, having a picture demonstration of what they have done. And there they will be speaking about one of the people, which is called, who was a young nurse who came to take care of the people in Turkey, Armenians, I mean, during the genocide, Jakob Kunzler. They will expose his picture, and they will be telling the story of Jakob Kunzler, collected orphans, brought them all the way to Lebanon, and he died in Lebanon. And there we pay tribute to him. Every year he is in Lebanon. This is the kind of, I'm saying this because the other thing that the Swiss churches did was they created, with the money that they had collected during the genocide, they told the Armenian church, the Catholicos et Cilicia, let's partner into a foundation together. Now we have the Swiss Armenian Foundation, where I am happen to be the president at this moment, and still we continue advocating through our foundation, not only just from foundation to foundation, institution to institution, but to real people. This is it. Unless we really create awareness at the local base level, which I hope that our Hidden Armenian project, the rise of that, will really move not only the Islamized Armenians, but also all other neighbors who suffered, and also those good Turks who will finally realize that they are living in lies and denial. Thank you.
Good. Dr. Abs, you have 1 minute.
You're muted, Dr. Abbas.
Yes, I know, but Segma was before me.
Segment will have the wrap-up word.
Go ahead.
Segment, yes,
Go
yes,
ahead,
yes.
please.
We're
Thank
giving
you.
you are all you are
Segment is
honored
from the
panelists.
house.
Yes, okay. Now, the actual advocacy is like a boiler full of holes. Energy is going through these holes. I want a well-mounted boiler, which I mean is a well-mounted organization. I mentioned it ever since the 80s to Armenians and to Assyrians and Syrians. Even though you are different people, different cultures, you are Christians, but you are different nations. Create one international organization which deals with the right. At that time, I wasn't aware of the Greek genocide too, which is 3 million almost. Which will, I mean, this organization will make lobbying and advocacy worldwide with the energetic approach. It will make some difference. Being dispersed like that, it will give effects here and there, but being all together, it will show the hugeness of the crisis, the problem. And as Danny said, Armenians, very good and nice young Armenians should know that they are being lied at, the same as the Jewish in Israel.
Right.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Sabri or Dr. Atman, any closing word, and then we'll hand over to Segma and then Seta, and that is my final comment for today. We're wrapping up.
Is it my turn?
Yes, Sabri.
Yeah.
Yes, Sabri. Your parting word.
Thank you so much. We spoke a lot about denialism, but why Turkey, other perpetrators deny their crimes, we didn't speak much about. And there is the reason why Turkey denied the Armenian, Assyrian, and Greek genocide. And they are not willing to speak about. They didn't kill only Armenians, Assyrian, and Greeks. And if you do your research now and see who are the most wealthy people in Turkey, you will find out the most wealthy people, they killed the Armenian, Assyrians, and Greeks, they took their properties. Also, if you go to Hakkari and to Diyarbakir, see the most wealthy Kurds, and they are the Kurds who took advantage of this genocide, and they are not willing to speak about it. What is the solution? We should reach the good Turks, Kurds, and all together, because this crime, it was not only against Armenians and our people, it was a crime against humanity. We should bring all people together and speak up and force the denial, Turkey and others with their policy, and we should speak more. And thank you so much for bringing us together. It was very important role that you played here. This is very good example. Thank you so much.
And Dr. Atman, you get to speak last as a part of the panelists. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, I will just like to address the point that Mr. Sabri addressed. For example, when the Saddam Hussein actually campaigned against the Kurdish started from 80 to 88. It was 8 years of genocide campaign they called Anfal. And Anfal, it is, let's say, a text of a Quran. It is a surah fi Quran. They tried at that time, so even as a regime, they tried to use, let's say, the mentality of the people to use this word just to show that's a jihad and that's everything's halal to go to kill those people. For that, up to date, most of the Islamic countries and Arabic countries actually deny to recognize all the genocide happens against Kurdish. Why? Because of this terminology, which is Anfal. The same at that time, Ottoman Empire, it was very smart to use the religion as a cover to encourage other, let's say, minorities to make this kind of. So that's also part of the fact-finding mission. We should provide such kind of facts for our actually generation. Why? To not be again misuse it for the future under the umbrella of this misusing of the religion. Yeah. So according to me, the opposite side of peace, actually, it's not violence, it's injustice. And non-recognizing of the genocide crimes, it's exactly injustice. And that's the reason most of the people, they are living Middle East, they are not poor, they have a money, they have a job, but they are living because they are not feeling such kind of human security. For that, they are looking for the better life.
Thank you so much. Ms. Zeta, over to you. I don't know if Segma wanted to jump in. Or yes, Segma.
I just have a question, if I can, to the whole group. Denial will continue. It's a reality that we are living with. But I believe it cannot last. How about you, from your experience?
Amen. The hope of the resurrection. Is good question. Sakwa and Zeta.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that history is always written by the powerful. So there's always one side of history that we get to learn in history books. And that's why so many of these stories, we don't hear much. For Mikey, who comes from the Caribbean, or me from Africa, we know very little about these issues. Unfortunately, not as much as we should. And the reason why we have done all these webinars is to pay respect to these fallen heroes who have paid the highest sacrifice of their life and who were killed and massacred because of racist policies. What we did today and in these webinars is actually witnessing. It's about addressing painful memories. And the importance of witnessing is that it rescues those who have died in senseless tragedies from a second death of being forgotten. Forgotten, I think, is the second genocide, as you said. And storytelling is that process that we need to construct the narrative. It's about bringing testimonies, gathering those testimonies, but also engaging in truth-seeking and truth-telling processes. And then we developed, based on that, a narrative that everyone can relate to and which also honors the truths that happened in the past. Because people need to understand what happened. And a lot of times, at least nowadays, other regions don't know about these stories, don't know about these tragedies. So commemoration is also very important. It's an important aspect of our humanity, because memory is more than reminiscing. It's the moral significance of remembering. And through remembering, we live forever, actually. So I would like to thank each and every one of you panelists for making the time for joining us for this webinar, and especially Mr. Sabri, who is connecting at 3 a.m. in Dallas, but all of you who have made the time to be with us, to honor us with your insights and your very moving testimonies. And Seta, maybe I will leave to you the last closing words. Thank you so much. It's very humbling to be with you.
Dr. Sabri and all who are Dr. Sabris, we cannot sleep when the topic is about genocide, my dear. Concerning denial, I would add one more thing. Turkey's policy of denial continues by hiring or by rewriting history. They are rewriting the history by the hands of the very prominent, very renowned European historians, and they are paying huge sums of money for these people to write the wrong history, whereby we have to fight constantly. They do have the money, and they are paying huge sums of money for these people. Secondly, as again, Mr. Sabri said, Turkey is built on the riches of the genocide of the First World War. The Atatürk, how shall I say, republic is built on the riches of the Armenians, Assyrians, and the rest that they killed. However, we have to thank you all of the panelists for your insightful input, for sharing your thoughts and your contributions in many ways to lead towards healing. There are many things that can be done for informing or advocating and healing. However, Dr. Abbas said that healing is very difficult and never healed. We can never be healed as long as recognition and reparation has not taken place. However, we continue our struggle especially in advocacy. We continue internationalization of the genocide memory thoughts through museums, whereby all the information, the resources, the art of genocide, archival records are safeguarded and are made public to the people. Films and international films made by international organizations or companies or individually prepared documentaries, these all educate, again, people on genocide. Memorials, visible topography, monuments, they are very obvious, impressive, and contemplative indicators of genocide. Pilgrimage to mourn of the mourners to honor their dead to these memorial sites, as is in Armenia, Zizernagapert, On specific dates, every year of 24th of April, Armenians go to Dizernagapet or to the centers where they have built memorials to their victims. Genocide cemeteries are other indicators whereby visitors can come and witness what has happened. Unfortunately, the Western powers, the United Nations, have ignored and failed to stop crimes against humanity. The Genocide Convention of 1948 is legally binding treaty in which all states parties must follow and uphold the convention's rules. The signing parties must not ever let this happen again, but they have failed to do so. In order for the Genocide Convention to be truly upheld, what needs to be changed are refugee laws, asylum laws, and crimes against humanity to be properly and thoroughly prosecuted. As history, the victims of genocide need their stories to be told with their dignity and respect. When victims are allowed to mourn, they are able to move forward and create a better society for the next generation and stop the generational post-traumatic stress disorder and shared grief. When laws are upheld and museums formed and movies made and books written, society recognizes that something terrible has taken place and it should never happen again. When genocides are memorialized, the problem has a name. It can be diagnosed and it can be cured. The wounds to be healed, to heal, should be opened, cured, and not let it fester. Genocide wounds are similar. They should be opened and cured and move forward. Thank you, WCC. Thank you, Sigma. Thank you, all the panelists and Mikey, for creating this opportunity and letting us have our voices heard to all around the world. Thank you very much.